Welcome to the Culture Show. Today we have a special guest in the building calling from South Africa. We have 2019 Miss South Africa, Sasha-Lee Laurel. Sasha, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
We are so happy to have you on the show. You know, we talk a lot about Africa and the beauty of Africa, and you happen to be 2019 Miss South Africa. So tell us about your journey in becoming the 2019 Miss South Africa.
You know, when they said 2020, the year of plenty, they weren't lying because I actually started off as Miss South Africa, the first runner-up in 2019. So on the 9th of August, I was, the first runner-up. And then our Miss South Africa, Zozibini Tunzi, went on to be Miss Universe. Mm-hmm. And then I obviously ascended. So it was very much a case of destiny delayed and not destiny denied for me. It came about in a different way, but regardless, I took the opportunity with both hands and, just tried to look more for the lesson in this,
Yeah. So tell us about your own personal upbringing. Were you born and raised in South Africa, or tell us about your upbringing?
So I was born in South Africa, and I've been here for the vast majority of my life. I've only left South Africa once, and that was to represent our country at the Miss World pageant in London. With regards to my upbringing in South Africa, I stayed in a small town in the southern suburbs in Alberton, a very close-knit community. Everyone knew one another, and I think it's a place where everybody should come to experience South Africa for what it truly is, because just how warm, the people are, and it's just this melting pot of cultures because everyone's so mixed and so diverse, and I think you get that all over South Africa. But I'm going to be biased and say that my hometown is obviously. Growing up, I had two younger siblings. I'm obviously the favorite for now, but given the position I hold now, but my younger sisters were always, my mom's kids because they were so young, and I always, used to look after them. So it was always, this sense of responsibility I had looking after my siblings. So I grew up that way, and I'm very grateful for how I was raised by my mom. Being a single parent, she did as much as she could, mm-hmm. and I think that's where I draw most of my strength from.
Wow, and look at you now. Look what she brought to the world. That's amazing. And now, a lot of people say beauty has like a gift and a curse. What are some of your personal challenges that you've had with being considered to be the most beautiful woman in South Africa last year in 2019? What is that perception like?
So in a world where people regard beauty and intelligence as mutually exclusive, I always find myself in a position where I constantly have to prove that I'm so much more than just how I look. Mm-hmm. I think that is one of the hardest things I've had to deal with, because as humans, we are multifaceted. We're not just our looks. We have so much more to offer. And I think that has been one of the most testing things for me. And with regards to the construct of beauty itself, that is something that I've, took on to challenge, because I felt like beauty was this predetermined, construct that was created by this subjective society. And once you didn't fit this pre-assumed template, you just weren't considered as beautiful. So I took it upon myself to broaden on the idea of what it meant to be beautiful, because beauty isn't about what you look like, it's about what you go and you put out into this world. And I think that, myself as well as our current Miss Universe, Zozibini Tunzi, tried our best to shatter, glass ceilings regarding beauty, so that other women would see themselves in us and it would be a future reimagined for women and men alike to understand that they need to show up and command their space and stop asking for permission and taking the reins on their life.
Right, right. That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, what do you think are some of the misconceptions that other people of different parts of the world perceive about South Africa?
You know, I'm just thinking of all of the random things I heard when I went to, Miss World. And a lot of people think, Africa, they think of underdeveloped. South Africa, where we stay right now, we are in the richest square mile in Africa. There's so much room for growth. There's been so much development. And I think that being regarded as inferior is something I wouldn't want to take lightly, because we're constantly in this position where we have to prove our worth as Africans. There's so much that comes out of Africa, so much culture that's so rich, and so much that we have to offer the world. And I think that people need to obviously be in a position where they want to learn about Africa and South Africa and what we have to offer.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, any current projects that you're currently working on? Any Miss Universe in your sights anytime soon, or what else do you have going on?
So I went on to represent our country at Miss World, and I took a cause that was close to me, and I found myself in a unique position that I could shine light on the issue of sexual assault, especially within our country. Currently, that's a reality for women or men every 26 seconds. I mean, it's on an average about 40% of people, or women for that matter, would be raped in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's no words to describe how disappointing the stats are.
Right.
But what we can do is do our best to restore the dignity of these individuals. So we created a rape comfort pack, and it's pretty daunting to think we're preparing for rape, because, currently the statistics are in favor of that happening every 26 seconds. So we need to be in a position where we're prepared for this. So the rape comfort pack brings dignity to these individuals in a time that they need it the most. You're in a position where you were just raped, and obviously, your underwear has been just taken for evidence, and in a position where your sugar is low given what you had currently survived. So the pack consists of a few hygiene products, a note that says it's not their fault, and I think that was one of the most important things for me, to understand that it was not my fault. And I think that's instrumental in not only getting you to a place where you would heal, but also liberating that person and letting them understand that it wasn't their fault. I think that is the most important thing that they would need to understand at that time.
That's an amazing thing that you're doing, Sasha. It's terrible that you hear these stories and these things that happen to young women all over the world, and it's amazing that you're making an effort to try to do something. So, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Do you consider yourself still in South Africa, or do you like to travel? Would you like to travel to a different area and make some noise somewhere else?
Yeah. So I'm not too sure where the next 5 years will take me, because I've never really been the type of person to be like, okay, this is my New Year's resolution, that's my 5-year plan. I've always been the type of person to set my intention. My intention would be to be consistent. My intention would be to show up to opportunities that I never really wanted to take before, because I didn't think they were for me. But I feel like I can do that now. So, it's a matter of, once I show up to these things, it opens up so many possibilities I've seen. When I looked at my life 5 years ago. I never really saw this for myself now, because I was on the eve then of going through PTSD, which is then the aftermath of trauma. So I've been the type of person, I think, given my lived experience, to just show up and command my space and, take it from there. I have been signed internationally, which is great. I got my first contract in Germany as a model, so I've just went international now, and I'm pursuing one in the States as well. So I'm just looking to go into that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to work on something and get you down here in the States soon. We'd love to have you here once all this Corona stuff is all over. So I'm sure the people would like to know, what are your favorite things to do?
Wow. So lately, given what we're currently facing, I think my favorite thing is to bake, because, given COVID-19, I think we all stuck inside. But prior to COVID, I was someone who loved being outside and in nature. And contrary to popular belief, I actually really enjoyed fishing. So I was one of those people who was always out and just outside and being within nature, because it was just always so peaceful. So I've always been an outdoorsy person. Lately, I've started to like gym quite a bit, so I think I also like that. But also just, listening to different types of music, being exposed to different types or different genres of music. I don't know if you've ever heard of Lofi.
Lofi?
But,
no.
Lofi hip-hop. Yeah, Lofi hip-hop is so cool.
Okay.
So
I'm going to check it out.
Just going through different archives of different types of music has been something I've always loved, because I feel like that is that universal language that we all just enjoy so much.
What do you feel is your personal calling? Yeah, everyone usually has like this calling that they feel that God created them for. What do you think is your calling?
It's quite a difficult question to answer. But what I think it is right now is that regardless of whatever title I've held, at the core of it all, I've always been a teacher. So I am a teacher at a school for kids who are differently abled, right? But regardless of the role that I find myself in, I feel like I'm still always a teacher. Within the Miss South Africa space, I was the girl who liberated women to celebrate the different types of body types that they had. I was also the woman who, together with so many other people, helped them take their power back with regards to sexual assault. So I feel like that's my purpose in this life, to be a teacher, whatever it is that I'm doing.
That's interesting. I've also worked with the developmentally disabled, and I've been a social worker for the last 20 years. So working with youth is something that we have in common. And again, I want to applaud you for what you're doing for the women. This type of stuff goes on all over the world. And last year in the U.S., there were over 100,000 African-American women missing. And we just don't know what happened to them. And they're probably being sold in some sort of sex trade somewhere, so that's amazing what you're doing.
Yeah, this is an issue that transcends borders, as much as it's a reality in South Africa, and it's something that we need to address here. It's definitely something that needs to be addressed globally.
So you talked about that Miss World and the modeling thing. What would be your advice to a young model coming up trying to get noticed?
I think for me, I've always had this one thing with regards to the modeling industry, and that is to not look to be noticed, but look to be respected. I think it's two different things, because when you're respected within the space, you're aware of the value you bring, even when it's testing, even when you don't get the call back. So you need to be very much aware of who you are within that space, because this is a space that, the arts is very testing for us. because you're basically like an entrepreneur. You need to show up. If you don't show up, you don't get the gig.
Right.
That's just how it is. And sometimes even when you show up, you don't get it. So it's about maintaining a good sense of self, knowing who you are, because you as a person are now regarded as a product and being compared to other models and who would be best suited for that specific job. So I think it's so important to know and understand who you are and the value that you bring.
That's so true. We talk about this all the time on the show about how you do what you love, and some people do things for money, but when you do what you love, it's just so much more satisfying. Now, of course, all the fellas around the world would like to know. And this is that question. They would like to know: are you single? Are you married? Are you involved? Are you looking to have that in the future?
I would say now I'm in a relationship with South Africa, which is pretty intense. It's quite a lot of people. So I'm in a relationship with South Africa. No one else. Yeah. I'm in a relationship with my people and my projects. So I think that's, for the vast majority of the people who want to know, I think that's all I'm really vested in right now. I think there's a time for everything, and this is the time for me to, work on the legacy that I want to create for my kids one day,
Now, again, on these curious brothers who want to know this, if you were to date,
yeah.
what type of man would he be?
Oh, wow. Okay, so firstly, he has to be funny. He has to be funny. I think a large part of my day is centered around humor and memes. So I'm going to be honest when I say that a sense of humor is important. But I think that over and above that, I just need to share the same value system with that person. Loyalty, honesty, and respect is at the core of everything. And I would need that person to share the same core value. And I think now more than ever, I value my freedom. My freedom to be an artist, my freedom to be myself. And I think it's so important that when getting into a relationship with anyone, that they are themselves. I don't want to be looking to start being with someone who looks to me to complete them. They should come in as full, and we should, complement one another, and that's how it's meant to be.
That's very, very true. Do you think it's important for Africans that are born abroad, outside of Africa, to connect to their African lineage?
So I think that it's important to understand the role heritage plays, not only in establishing, a sense of self, but also in establishing a sense of community. Being someone who is mixed race, I think I'm left with a few questions, like a few question marks, because Heritage Day for me is extremely confusing because I don't know what my ancestral line is. So I think now more than ever, among the minority groups, a sense of community is necessary because together they need to basically emancipate themselves from black inferiority, which comes as a result of centuries of structural and systemic racism. And because that's at the core of it. That's why you need to understand where you come from. And I think this group would need to understand one another so that there isn't a divide and segregation among the group. I think that's, so important because they would need to understand one another in order to combat this, in order to combat other things that they would be facing. Another thought actually comes to mind for me. It's actually based off a book from Frantz Fanon, Black Skin, White Masks. I can't quote him verbatim, but to my understanding and to my conclusion with regards to some of the ideals that allude to, the question, the rest possibly rejecting the ideals of being African, because could be due to them being regarded as inferior or subhuman. So I think the question is rather, does the location that African Americans find themselves in embrace their diversity, or is embracing their culture conducive to their progression or acceptance within that society? I think a lot that's going on would suggest that, the latter is really not the case.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very good answer there. Now, as you're doing your modeling career, usually modeling sometimes leads to other things. Is there possibly acting in films and movies? I'm sure in the future you'll probably get a lot of offers.
I've always been a firm believer in sticking to what you're good at. And I think acting is just not one of those things for me. I've always been someone who said that, I'm a product of the conversations that resonate with me the most. I'm a communicator. I love communicating with people. So I do see myself as someone who could possibly be on a talk show, but not necessarily in a movie. I don't really know how to cry on demand. I'm just going to use that as like a base point to determine whether or not I'm successful. But there have been moments where I've honestly been dramatic, but hey, I don't think that would be a firm standing for me starting an acting career.
Okay. Honest answer. I just had to ask you because once you come to the States, I'm just warning you. Once you come to the States, they're gonna be ringing up your line. So just letting you know. So, what about now? You talked a little bit about this new form of hip hop. So let's talk about some of your favorite music and who's your favorite music artist. Let's start with your favorite music.
So lately, I've been loving the 90s. I think I go through certain phases, going through the archives. Growing up, I was, exposed to a lot of Tupac Shakur. And I think that, given the time we grew up in and the injustices a lot of, like, our peers faced, they would listen to that music, so we would listen to it too. So we still loved it now. Still love it now. So I'm still listening to that.
You're on my wave now.
Yeah, basically. So, I'm still listening to Tupac, and I still really appreciate, Boys to Men. Mm-hmm. And I actually, during my Miss South Africa experience, got to meet Tevin Campbell. How cool is that? Like, no one can say that they got to meet Tevin Campbell in South Africa, except for a few of us. So I got to meet Tevin Campbell. I think a lot of the old school music is what I still love, like Karen White. But recently, I stumbled upon something called Lofi hip hop. Mm-hmm. Kind of sounds like the stuff you would listen to when you study. Mm-hmm. But I like the stuff from Kina, the music from Kina. So it's Kina.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's like the stuff that I'm listening to now. So I'm in between the 90s and the Lofi.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're today on the show. We're going to talk a lot about Tupac and what he meant to the culture. With the current situations that are going on, a lot of people are starting to quote Tupac a lot more than before, than recently. And his music was timeless and definitely a very special individual when it came to relating to people and the struggle and all of that great stuff that he did.
But I think on basing off like what you're saying, a lot of people drawing on Tupac for quotes to get them through this difficult time. I think the one that would be the most important would be, after every dark night there's a brighter day. Mm-hmm. We need to maintain hope. We need to maintain hope. So after, I think there's a silver lining eventually. Mm-hmm. We just need to be aware of that and hold on to the hope of that, because I think that that's one of the lyrics by him that I hold here, because there would be a lot of adversity that we face, not only as the people of South Africa, but people all over the world. So holding on to, after every dark night there's a brighter day, I think that's just so important.
I think that's Changes. That's the song Changes, right?
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. Yeah, that's the joint. I love that joint. That's one of my favorite songs. They found actually one of the guy in the former president of Iran. Yeah, he posted a lyric from that song. I ain't going to mention it on the show today, but now also let's talk about. You talked about Tupac, and you talk about women that have faced rape, and Tupac talked a lot about that. You know, what would you like the women of South Africa to know about you?
I think it's about the legacy I want to leave, because I want to be remembered for the idea that the darkest moments in your life can birth the brightest and the lightest. I don't think I became Miss South Africa on the basis of all my successes and all the things that I've done well. I think I became Miss South Africa given all the adversity that I faced, because that was my biggest teacher. That was my biggest teacher. So it's a matter of using their adversity to their advantage.
That is special. You know, a good friend of mine used to have an old saying, and his saying was, and he's also on the show, and he says, "Fear, no fear," and he says, with fear, it means face everything and rise. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that was pretty
Oh, wow,
cool.
that's yeah.
You know, face everything and rise. You know, whatever you're going through, you know, go through it. Once you've gone through it, it's not hard to go through it a second time, you know? So
Yeah.
we have the current situations, Sasha, the current situations going on in the world. Obviously, more in the States than anywhere else with this situation with George Floyd. Um, we're
Yeah.
not going to talk too much, but when it reached South Africa and you first saw it, how did it make you feel?
You know, I think it's devastating to see. I think I speak for everyone when I say that it's hard to put into words what one would feel when you watch someone get murdered. Um, and I think now more than ever, we need to understand that freedom is nothing without equality. It's nothing without equality. Because to understand the issue with regards to George Floyd, we need to look at Amy Cooper, because Amy Cooper makes us understand the relationship that George Floyd had with the police, you know? And I
Hmm.
mean, this was just the other day. Everything that happens is interrelated. And with regards to Amy Cooper, I think Trevor Noah said it so well. This was a woman who knew how to use the power of her whiteness against a man and his blackness.
Hmm.
She understood racism in a structural way. You
Right.
know, it showed you how she perceived her relationship with the police and how she perceived his relationship with the police, how she perceived it would be. You know, and I need to reiterate this. This was an educated woman who weaponized her tears with a blatant disregard for how that would affect someone. So with getting to like the issue with George Floyd, I find that we once again, you know, on this merry-go-round,
Hmm.
and we've been way before Ahmed Arbery
Hmm.
and so many others. And at the core of it all, just getting to the point here, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, and this group has been disproportionately affected by so many things. And police brutality, police brutality is only one of those things. But I
Hmm.
think, you know, through it all, we need to maintain hope and work toward a world where each race would enjoy parity of esteem.
Hmm.
And I think it's possible. On the words of Nelson Mandela, racism is something that's taught. And if it's taught, it's something that we can unlearn. But it's up to societies to decide that. Laws and regulations can be passed at an institutional level. But what this actually requires is acceptance by the public. and they need to behave accordingly. That's just my thought on it.
That's very, very true. And you share a lot of wisdom. You have learned a lot of good things and shared a lot of good things, positive things that you have going on throughout your career. And we wish you all the success, and we hope to possibly collaborate with you once this Corona thing is over, and that we are able to all come together once again. And I want to say one thing about this George Floyd thing, and that's is that we have to move past the past, and we have to go on to the future. You can't look at someone's skin complexion and hate them the way they were born. They can't help that. This is very, very, very much negative. Now, if people want to find you, Sasha, what is the best means to find you, to book you, to book you for an interview right now for the current situations? How would they do that?
So you'd actually find me on Instagram. So that would be actually the best way to find me. So it's at Sasha-Lee Laurel on Instagram. It's at Miss Sasha_Lee on Twitter. And then I do have an email address within my Instagram feed. So they could just get hold of me there.
Okay. Any shout outs that you want to give to anybody out there in the world?
I think just to everyone, this too shall pass, whether it's with regards to what we're currently facing due to COVID-19 or due to the injustices our people are facing. When I say our people, I say that not because I'm mixed race. I think that we are, all part of the human race, and that's the most important thing here. We need to really look out for one another, and I think it's on us to ensure that everyone is treated equally and everyone gets the life that they deserve.
Miss Sasha-Lee Laurel, thank you for joining us on the Culture Show. We are so grateful to have you. We wish you all the success. And yes, we would definitely invite you on as our platform rises. It will continue to rise. And we will provide you with a copy of this interview that you can do what you want with it as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.